The gentle sunset cast a golden glow over the city of Shreveport, Louisiana, tinting the stained glass windows of the local church. Inside the spacious fellowship hall, the air felt heavy with the presence of hundreds of people. The sound of metal folding chairs being adjusted and the quiet hum of conversations created an unusual atmosphere for this fateful evening. The space, typically reserved for post-service potlucks and Bible study sessions, now carried a special solemnity. At the front of the room stood Donald Trump, his unmistakable presence highlighted by his signature, golden hair, and tan complexion under the fluorescent lights. Yet tonight he exuded an uncharacteristic calmness, as if he was fully aware of the gravity of the moment. The hall was a vibrant tapestry of the local community, small families sitting close together, elderly retirees with silvery hair, and curious residents eager to witness this unique event. But amidst the crowd, a small figure caught attention, not because of her size, but because of her unusual intensity. 8-year-old Lily, dressed in her best Sunday dress, clutched an old leather-bound Bible tightly to her chest. It was a cherished heirloom passed down from her late grandmother, its pages worn and its golden lettering faded with time. Before arriving, her mother had whispered to her, "You can ask him, but only if you're brave enough and truly serious about your question." Lily nodded, her small heart racing with anticipation. For 3 weeks, Lily had been practicing her question countless times. During recess at school, while her classmates played on the playground, she would sit alone under an old maple tree, rewriting the question in her small notebook. At night, in her star-adorned bedroom, she would softly murmur the question to herself until she fell asleep. "Mr. Trump, what does God mean to you?" A simple question, yet one that held an entire universe within it. For Lily, this question was not just a child's innocent curiosity. It stemmed from countless evenings spent with her grandmother, listening to stories about faith and love. Her grandmother had passed away 6 months ago, leaving Lily not only an old, worn Bible, but also unanswered questions lingering in her tender heart. "Lily," her grandmother often said in her warm, lullaby-like voice, "faith is like tiny seeds. You can't see them grow immediately, but you have to be patient and trust." Those words echoed in Lily's mind, especially during moments when she felt lonely and missed her grandmother dearly. When news of Donald Trump's visit to the church broke, Lily saw it as her opportunity, not because he was famous, but because he was an adult who might help her understand more about faith, God, and perhaps the lessons her grandmother had tried to impart. Every morning before school, Lily spent 5 minutes reading a passage from her grandmother's Bible. Its yellowed pages were marked with careful pencil notes in her grandmother's handwriting. Sometimes Lily's tiny fingers traced those lines, as if trying to touch a piece of her grandmother that still lingered. "I don't know if I'm brave enough," Lily whispered to her grandmother's photo on her desk. In the photo, her grandmother smiled warmly, her eyes sparkling with the peace and joy Lily longed to find. "But you always said God gives us strength when we need it, didn't you?" At school, Lily's teacher occasionally noticed her scribbling in her notebook, instead of paying attention to multiplication lessons. Her handwriting was messy, capturing not only her question, but also her thoughts about how it might be received. "Will he think it's a silly question? Will he understand why I'm asking this?" Lily's mother, Sarah, noticed a change in her daughter. In the evenings, instead of watching her favorite cartoons, Lily often sat by the window, gazing at the starry sky and murmuring words she had carefully chosen. Sarah understood that her daughter was on a spiritual journey of her own, one she might not yet fully comprehend. "Mom," Lily asked one night as Sarah tucked her in, "do you think Grandma is watching me from heaven?" Sarah held back tears as she replied, "I'm sure she is, sweetheart, and she'd be so proud of what you're about to do." As the day of the meeting approached, Lily began having vivid dreams. In them, she stood before a vast crowd, but couldn't find her voice. Some nights she woke with a racing heart and had to clutch her grandmother's Bible tightly to calm herself. Sarah tried to prepare her daughter. "You know, sometimes the most important questions come from the smallest hearts." Lily didn't entirely grasp the depth of her mother's words, but she felt the love and support within them. On the morning of the meeting, Lily woke up early. She spent nearly an hour picking the perfect dress, the light blue one her grandmother had sewn for her last birthday. It was the last piece of clothing her grandmother had made. Lily carefully smoothed out the wrinkles as if touching the cherished memories of her beloved grandmother one more time. On the way to the church, Lily held her grandmother's old Bible tightly against her chest, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat through the worn leather cover. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, missing her grandmother, the fear of speaking in front of a crowd, and a faint hope that Trump's answer might help her understand the faith her grandmother had always tried to pass down to her. As the car stopped in front of the church, Lily saw the line of people waiting to enter. Families with children, elderly with canes, and young professionals in neat suits. All of them seemed eager and expectant. But for Lily, this wasn't just an ordinary event. It was a moment that might shape her understanding of faith for the rest of her life. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked gently as they joined the queue. Lily nodded, gripping her mother's hand tightly. Her heart was a mix of fear and excitement, but above all, there was a deep sense that this was the right thing to do, a feeling that could only come from the pure faith of a child. As they entered the church, the warm and solemn atmosphere embraced Lily. Light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting vibrant patterns on the floor. She was reminded of Sunday mornings spent sitting next to her grandmother on those wooden pews, listening to hymns and sermons about God's love. A strange sense of peace washed over Lily. Perhaps it was the sign her grandmother had spoken of, a way God lets us know we're on the right path. She clutched the Bible tighter to her chest, and in that moment, all her worries and fears melted away, leaving only an unwavering belief that everything was about to unfold as it was meant to. When Lily stood up from her seat, the room seemed to hold its breath. The slow whirring of ceiling fans created a rhythmic backdrop, like the pulse of her own nervous heart. The fluorescent lights reflected on the faces of the audience, their attention fully fixed on the small girl. Lily's tiny footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, each step marking a beat in the silent symphony of this moment. The worn Bible in her hands caught the light, highlighting its frayed leather edges and yellowed pages that peeked out unevenly, a tangible reminder of her grandmother's memory reaching out to touch the present. Donald Trump stood at the podium, his familiar figure clad in a dark suit, but there was something different in his gaze. Instead of the usual confidence he projected on television, his eyes held a trace of curiosity, almost tenderness, as he noticed the next person to ask a question was a little girl. The crowd began to murmur. A few elderly attendees smiled encouragingly as Lily walked by. In one corner, an older woman quietly dabbed her eyes, perhaps reminded of her own grandchild. Parents in the room tightened their grip on their children's hands, silently wondering if their own child could summon such bravery. "What's your name, young lady?" Trump leaned down slightly, his tone much softer than the political rhetoric he was known for. "My name is Lily," she replied, her voice trembling, yet clear, resonating in the silence of the hall. She clutched the old Bible tightly to her chest, as though drawing strength from its worn pages. When Lily voiced her question, the atmosphere froze. "Mr. Trump, what does God mean to you?" The simple words echoed through the hall, creating a profound stillness rarely found in political gatherings. Seconds passed in absolute silence. A man at the back of the room coughed softly, the sound cutting through the tension like thunder. Trump stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the Bible in Lily's hands. Something in her question seemed to stir a deep part of his soul, perhaps a place he hadn't visited in a long time. His lips parted as if to speak, but then closed again, as though searching for the right words. In the crowd, expressions began to shift. The initial curiosity transformed into something more profound, a realization that they were witnessing a truly extraordinary moment. Some began to set their phones aside, understanding that this wasn't a moment to record, but one to experience. Sarah, Lily's mother, gripped the edge of her seat, her knuckles white. She saw her daughter standing there, small yet unyielding, and in that instant, she realized that faith could take the most miraculous forms. Finally, Trump moved. He slowly stepped down from the podium, leaving his usual position of authority. The movement made a few security personnel in the room tense, but he raised a hand to signal that everything was fine. "That's a big question," he began, his voice dropping to a rare tone of sincerity, "and it's not one I've always had the answer to." This admission seemed to make the entire room hold its breath. Donald Trump, known for his unwavering confidence in definitive answers, was admitting uncertainty in front of an 8-year-old girl. The mood in the room shifted. The attendees began to sense that this wasn't just another political event. Instead, they were witnessing an honest conversation about faith, a topic that many of them, perhaps, had wrestled with in their own lives. An elderly woman in the back row gently dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. A middle-aged man in a business suit instinctively reached for the cross hanging around his neck. These small gestures rippled through the room like waves, creating an atmosphere of shared understanding and quiet empathy. Lily stood still, her clear eyes fixed on Trump, waiting. There was no judgment or expectation in her gaze, only pure curiosity and a longing to understand. Perhaps it was this sincerity that made Trump feel he could open up. "When I was about your age," Trump began, his tone softening, "I had a lot of questions about God, too. My parents took me to church every Sunday." He paused, his eyes seeming to gaze at a distant memory. "I remember sitting in pews like these, staring up at the stained glass windows, wondering if God was even listening to me." This statement drew nods from many in the audience. It was a question they had all likely asked themselves at one point, in their loneliest moments. Outside the church, the Louisiana sunset painted the sky a deep red. Rays of light filtered through the branches of ancient oaks, creating intricate patterns on the ground. Police cars and security vehicles lined the street, their lights flashing in the fading daylight. Black-suited security personnel stood in a protective circle around the church, their earpieces crackling with intermittent static. Jim Stevens, the head of the security team with 20 years of experience protecting politicians, found himself bewildered by the situation. The usual security protocols seemed irrelevant as Trump stepped out of the safety of his designated position to approach Lily. Jim exchanged glances with his team, who were equally tense, but none dared to interrupt this extraordinary moment. Beyond the security perimeter, a small crowd had gathered, many holding their phones aloft to capture the scene through the stained glass windows. Live streams began to spread across social media, accompanied by thousands of comments and reactions. "You won't believe what's happening in here," a woman whispered into her phone, her voice trembling with emotion. Inside the church, reporters had lowered their cameras. Accustomed to chasing shocking moments or controversial statements, they now simply watched in silence. Lisa Chen, a seasoned journalist for a major newspaper, discreetly wiped away tears. 20 years in the field had taught her that sometimes the most significant moments couldn't be captured on camera. On social media, short clips of the interaction began to go viral at lightning speed. Hashtags like Nash Charles Lily's Faith and Nash Trump and the Bible quickly trended nationwide. Millions across the country followed the unfolding story on their screens, with many confessing they had pulled over on the side of the road to focus entirely on what was happening. As Trump continued speaking, his voice grew deeper and more heartfelt. Security personnel, almost instinctively, lowered their earpieces, unwilling to miss a single word. Even those skeptical of politicians had to admit there was something profoundly genuine about this moment. The words weren't rehearsed talking points or polished political rhetoric. They were raw experiences, deep reflections on faith and its meaning in life. The crowd listened, captivated and moved. Trump's stories about faith, the trials he faced, the moments of doubt, and how he found purpose in his darkest hours resonated deeply with everyone in the room. His vulnerability struck a chord, making the message feel intimate and real, transcending the typical boundaries of a political event. Lily remained standing, her eyes locked on Trump's face. She seemed to understand that her question had opened a door, not just in Trump's heart, but in the hearts of everyone present. When the first tear rolled down Lily's cheek, it wasn't from sadness. It was a tear of understanding, a realization that faith, whether held by a president or an 8-year-old girl, is a challenging yet beautiful journey. The atmosphere in the room shifted with each passing second. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling seemed to soften, as if holding their breath along with the audience. Through the tall windows, the sunset poured in, casting pale purple streaks across the floor, blending with the warm golden glow from the vintage wall lamps. Individual reactions began to emerge within the crowd. In the corner, A middle-aged janitor quietly pulled out an old photo from his wallet, a picture of his son who had passed away in an accident last year. His eyes reflected fresh pain, but as Trump spoke about loss and faith, there was a faint glimmer of hope. Nearby, a young woman in a business suit clutched a rosary tightly in her hand. She had received devastating news that morning about her mother's terminal illness, and Trump's words about faith amidst trials seemed to soothe her bleeding heart. In the third row, an elderly couple held hands tightly. They had been attending this church together for 50 years, and for the first time, they felt a political gathering carry the sacredness of a Sunday service. Phones in the room began buzzing with notifications about viral posts, yet curiously, no one checked them. Instead, many silenced their devices and placed them face down, unwilling to let technology disrupt the sacredness of the moment. A few young reporters in the back of the room scrambled to take notes, only to realize that no words could truly capture the atmosphere in the church at that moment. Cameras from major news outlets continued recording, capturing every second, but even the videographers sensed that their footage could never convey the sacredness of what was unfolding. Sarah, Lily's mother, felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Her trembling hand rose to her mouth as she tried to stifle her sobs. In this moment, she didn't just see her daughter, she saw her own mother reflected in Lily. The same pure faith, the same courage to ask difficult questions. Her heart swelled with pride, mingled with an aching sense of loss and longing. On the podium, Trump's demeanor shifted in subtle but profound ways. His typically rigid posture softened, not from fatigue but as if he were shedding his usual defenses. His hands, known for their decisive gestures, now moved slowly, occasionally pausing midair, as if searching for just the right words. His face, usually marked by bold and commanding expressions, now revealed a delicate spectrum of emotions. His eyes softened as they met Lily's, and his lips quivered slightly when he spoke of deeply personal memories. Occasionally he rubbed his face, a rare and genuine display of emotion. The sounds in the room took on a unique quality. The gentle hum of the ceiling fans provided a soothing backdrop, interspersed with the soft rustling of Bible pages, deep sighs, and the occasional stifled sob. Each sound felt wrapped in the velvet embrace of shared emotion. From the back of the room, a woman began to hum a hymn, her voice so soft it was barely more than a whisper. Yet in the stillness, the melody drifted through the air like a gentle breeze, touching every heart present. Gradually, others joined in, their voices blending into a natural and deeply moving harmony. A spontaneous choir born out of the moment's profound emotion. The atmosphere in the room had transformed completely. The invisible barriers between people seemed to dissolve, replaced by a profound sense of connection, an empathy and mutual understanding that can only arise from sharing the most heartfelt stories of faith and life. In this moment, they were no longer strangers. They were souls united in experiencing something greater than themselves. The story of Lily and Donald Trump was more than just a remarkable evening in Shreveport. It stood as a testament to the power of faith, the impact of simple yet sincere questions, and the ability to connect people through profound spiritual experiences. Each of us carries questions about faith, the meaning of life, and our relationship with the divine. Sometimes these questions come from the most unexpected places, like an 8-year-old girl with her grandmother's Bible, and they have the power to change the way we see the world and ourselves. We invite you to share your story in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a special moment of faith? What touched your heart the most about this story? Let your reflections inspire others. Don't forget to hit the like button if this story brought you meaningful value, and subscribe to our channel to discover more inspiring tales of faith, hope, and humanity. Together, we can create a community where stories of faith are heard and shared. Remember, sometimes the simplest questions lead to the deepest answers, and in the most unexpected moments, we find the missing pieces of ourselves.